knows we're going to record this lesson. That way it'll be posted on the bow page so you can go back and you can review things that we talked about, and you'll be able to see this class again. So if you want to turn your camera off and not be recorded, you don't have to do that. You don't have to have your camera on. But right now, if we want to, we'll go ahead and I'll go down the line. And if you want to share your name and where you're at or where you're from and talk about your experience with wild game, we'll go ahead and start with Donna. Your name is first on my screen, if you want to share.
Donna Smith. I'm way down here in the western end of the state, and really close to Paducah. I've been seriously bow hunting for 3 years. Haven't managed to get a body yet. I have stuck some, but I get so shaky that I can't hit them in the right spot. They wind up running around with my arrow hanging out of them. But I do get them with a rifle. I'm here for tips on how to cook it because that's what we eat all the time. I'm hoping I'll learn some different ways I can do it to make the kid happy. And we have wild hog that we have filled the freezer with, and that's a whole different kind of animal to cook. So
down in Western Kentucky. Yeah, I love Western Kentucky. I spent 2 years down there at Murray State, so I'm familiar with your area down there. So awesome, great to have you.
I am just at the very edge of McCracken County. I'm almost in Ballard.
Okay.
Very blessed to be really rural, surrounded by agriculture fields, strips of woods, and I have a 7-acre alfalfa field. Just waiting on them deer. Step on out there.
All right. Next, I see Michael, if you want to go ahead and share.
Yeah, Michael, I'm in Richmond. I've been hunting for 5 or 6 years now. Unfortunately, I haven't bagged any. I was drawn for the Bluegrass Depot quota hunt 2 years back, and I actually hit one high on the shoulder, but I didn't have any blood trail to track, so I didn't hit it correctly. But as far as wild game, I've ate it through wild game dinners and field to fork areas that I've attended, but that's as far as I've gotten. I'm trying to get my knowledge where my family wasn't actively hunting, so I'm just trying to get into it to be more sustainable with everything going on in the nation and world. I figure it's a good time to go back to the basics, like start canning and prepping in case something happens.
Awesome. Well, good to have you. So far we got somebody from Western Kentucky. We got Richmond. These are the places I've lived over the past 4 years, Western Kentucky, and then I lived in Richmond, so I've been all around. Up next, we have Kendra, if you want to go ahead and share.
Hi, my name's Kendra. I'm in Lebanon Junction, which is in Bullitt County. This is my first year hunting. Haven't gotten anything yet. Had a close call, but then my fiance ended up bagging it because we weren't sure I hit it or not. He wasn't too happy about that either because it was only a 4-pointer. So I have been cooking his venison, and he also got drawn for the elk hunt this past year too. So I've been cooking his elk as well.
That's awesome. Can we see the puppy?
Well, there's this one. She's a miniature wire hair dachshund. She's Harry Carey. And then there is Penelope. She's a little Bichon.
Awesome. Now, I find it crazy that I was sitting there thinking, I said, I hope Kendra doesn't say Bullitt County because I moved from Western Kentucky to Richmond to Bullitt County. So, all right. Up next, we have Ashley.
Hi, I'm Ashley. I've got some 3-year-olds running around so that you might hear them in the background. I live in Winchester and I don't hunt. I'm kind of new to fishing, but I really like to cook, but I've never cooked wild game. So I'm excited to kind of learn about that.
Awesome. All right, then April. April, were you in one of Rachel's classes about birding?
Yes, I was.
Okay, I was gonna say you look familiar. All right.
Well, my name is April. I am in Mercer County. Just recently moved out here. My husband and I bought some land, as you can see behind me. My husband is the main hunter of the family, but I just started 2 seasons ago and was lucky enough to bag my first buck on my very first season. And then last season I got a doe, and I actually harvested top to bottom my first doe last year. He usually does all of the cooking, so I'm anxious to learn a little bit more about prepping and preparing venison so that he doesn't always have to do it. So I'm really looking forward to learning a few more tips about that.
Cool. Good to have you. All right. Vanessa, you're up next.
Hi.
You were in Rachel's class as well?
Yes, I was.
Awesome.
I am from Casey County. I heard you mention Casey County.
Yep. I taught last year in Casey County at Walnut Hill, Liberty Elementary,
Awesome.
and why am I drawing a blank?
Jones Park.
Jones Park. There we go. Yeah.
Awesome. My dad hunts, my husband hunts, and this year this girl's gonna hunt, and hopefully I want a doe. I want the meat. So
There you go.
I love deer meat, love it. So I'm excited. Hopefully I'll succeed.
Yep. Good to have you.
Thank you.
All right. And then Jessica.
I'm Jessica. I live in Pulaski County. I've never hunted before, but I have cooked wild game whenever I lived in Michigan. But it's been about 15 years since I've done it, so I'm just excited to get back into it.
Awesome. Good to have you. Cynthia.
I was raised by a hunter, but my mother was not a good cook and no adventure there, so I'd like to know how to cook this deer.
Awesome. Good deal. I see DJ next. And if you don't want to share, you don't have to share. All right. Rachel has went. Whitney, if you want to share, more than welcome to. You don't have to.
Good morning. My name's Whitney Stam, and this is my third bow adventure. I'm relatively new to hunting and cooking wild game. My husband is an avid hunter, so when we met, I started getting a lot of wild game from him and figuring out ways to cook it. So I did a lot through the extension service when I worked for them with some of the cooked wild recipes. I've canned some venison, but just always looking for new ways to cook it and to utilize it.
Awesome. Good deal. And then, all right. I believe that's it. If we have some more people that join throughout, we'll let them in. And if they want to talk, tell their experiences, they are more than welcome to. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get on with our cooking. So we're going to do 2 wild game recipes today. And I have a few other things we're going to talk about. The main 2 we're going to focus on is we have a venison backstrap and we have some fish that we're going to make a ceviche out of. So Rachel, I'm going to go ahead and pass this camera off to you. Yeah, we'll use the tripod. So,
Hold on, I gotta flip it. There we go.
all right. You just twist the top there. All right. Good to go. All right, so we're going to start with our venison. I've had this marinating overnight, and I hope you all got a chance to see the video that was on the Bow page talking about what's in this marinade. So it's just Worcestershire sauce and lemon. All right, and that's going to sit in there, and we're going to let that meat soak in that overnight. To get started with our venison, we're going to use a skillet. We're going to put some oil in the skillet. We're just going to put enough in there to coat the bottom. And we're going to start it with just a little bit over medium heat. All right. And as we go, what cut of deer? Okay, so this is the back strap. All right, the back strap is, you'll hear that sometimes referred to as the loin. There's a little difference there between the back strap and the loin. The back strap is what is going to run along the spine. So on each side of the spine, from the shoulders down to the back quarters, the hind quarters, you're going to have this boneless cut of meat. All right. So I'll go ahead and pull this out and show it to you. All right. So this here is our back strap. It's boneless. Now the tenderloin, what sometimes people get the terminology confused with, the tenderloin is actually going to be on the inside of the cavity. So the back strap is on the outside. The tenderloin is going to be on the inside. They're both going to run along the rib cage, with the tenderloin being on the inside, the back strap being on the outside. All right. Is there any more questions about that? No. All right. So we're going to start with our temperature a little bit hotter than what we're going to end with. And the reason that we're doing that is we want to get a good sear on the outside of the meat. And so when you talk about steak, when somebody refers to a good steak, they refer to it as what? Somebody go ahead, and if anybody wants to turn their mic off, what do you hear when you talk about a good steak? It's what?
Tender and juicy.
There we go. That's what I was looking for. Tender and juicy. So what we're going to focus on here with the searing on the outside is we're going to try to trap all those juices on the inside. So it's going to kind of get a little crisp on the outside, and then we're going to turn the heat down and let the inside cook a little bit more. So that's the first thing we're going to do, worry about the juices. We're going to sear the outside, keep everything on the inside. All right, so we're just letting our pan get a little hot here. Go ahead. Now sometimes the Worcestershire sauce and the oil don't want to react well together, and it might cause a little oil to pop out of the pan. But we're still letting it get a little hot here. We're just going to spread it out. Now, any questions so far about what we're doing with searing the outside here? No questions? All right, so one thing while we're letting that get started, one thing that was talked about yesterday, somebody mentioned something about they had some turkey that ended up, got freezer burned, it ended up rancid. So one thing that I recommend when you are processing your wild game is a vacuum sealer. I know this vacuum sealer, it's going to put this meat in there, it's going to take all the air out, it's going to keep that meat in there, it's going to keep it fresh tasting for a lot longer than it would if you had a Ziploc bag. So I highly recommend getting yourself a vacuum sealer. You can find a good one online. It's going to do everything you want for about 40, 50 bucks. All right. Then you can also see it's got some stuff right on here. Always make sure to put the date, what cut of meat. And this piece of venison right here was actually harvested by my girlfriend. She harvested her first deer last year. All right, so I'll make sure to put her name on it so I know when we're eating it that, this was from her hard work. And I really like to know that she has got into the wild game as much as I have. So I always make sure to put her name, the date, and what cut of meat. Now, one thing you want to be careful with is a lot of times I've seen people, all right, they bag it up, they just chuck it in their freezer. You still want to be careful with it to not damage the bag. All right, and if it is a cut that has bones in it, those bones can poke the bag. And once that air gets in there, it can cause a lot of ice and moisture to get in there. It's going to speed up the spoilization process. All right.
So if you have your deer processed, should you reseal it?
If can you explain that question again? You're saying reseal it?
Yeah, so should you take it out of the packaging that they put it in and put it in a vacuum?
Gotcha. If you take it to a processor, I do not have experience with taking the meat to a processor, but I'm going to say that what they're doing is probably going to be it's going to be good enough that you won't have to take it out and reseal it. So
Okay.
I wouldn't worry about that. I'm more along the lines of talking about if you're doing it on your own at home. I recommend a vacuum sealer, but those processors have industrial stuff, and they'll take care of you.
Okay. Thank you.
Good question. All right. Yeah. So you can see now we got our temperature going. We're just putting a good little sear on the outside. All right, now something else that we'll talk about, because I know we talked a little bit about processing and taking care of your wild game before you get it into the kitchen. Something that I highly recommend if you're new to the wild game or something that you're used to, something that you've always done, that's primarily what you eat. From both ends of the spectrum, I highly recommend this book. All right, it is the Meat Eater Cookbook. You see that on there, all right? All right. So this book is not only going to give you basic recipes, it's going to go and let you think outside of the box. It has a lot of different things in there that you would never even think about. And the cool thing is, not only does it show you how to cook the meat and give you all the ingredients, it's also going to show you things like how to process in different ways. All right, so some people may have the means to hang a deer. Some people might have to do it on the ground. It just depends on your situation and what you have. And this book is going to show you all sorts of different ways that you can do that. So see here, I know somebody mentioned earlier about wild hog, right? So it's showing different ways to process the wild game, how to take care of it and get your cuts that you want. And then beyond that, it goes into telling you how to cook it. And now this covers, I think it says it covers over 100 different species, not 100 different recipes, but it covers a lot of different species, everything from whitetail deer to elk. It talks about rattlesnake and sea cucumber and turtle and all sorts of things. So I highly recommend getting that book and checking that out. So once again, we're just using our little bit higher heat to get that sear. You can see a little char on it. So once it starts to get a little firm and a little char on the outside, that's what we're looking for. We're going to let it sit on that side just a little bit longer. This side doesn't have as much of that. Do we have any questions about what we have talked about so far? No question? One question?
No.
No. So something that was asked yesterday, somebody mentioned something where I referred to hanging a deer. All right. A lot of times you'll hear people have their different methods, and maybe mine's just different from what other people like to do. But I highly recommend allowing your deer time to hang and for it to go through rigor mortis before you start to cut that meat off the bone. Listen to a meat scientist talk about this who spent his whole life studying how to get the best quality meat. And so I highly recommend if you hang that deer and you allow it to sit, if you have the right temperature, so around 40 degrees. Right now it's a little hot outside to leave a deer hanging overnight, but if you have it below 40 degrees, you can leave that deer hanging out and you can come back the next day and you can get it in the morning and cut that meat off the bone. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow that meat time to relax. Those muscles are going to relax. And then when you cut it off, it's going to come off easier and it's going to come off and give you a better quality meat. So you may hear people say, well, when I harvest a deer, I put those tenderloins on the grill or on the skillet that before the night's over. But what that actually does is when you cut that meat off there before the animal has went through rigor mortis, it's going to cause that meat to tense up some. And then once you cook it, it's going to cause it to tense up more. So you want to let it relax before you start to cut into it and then before you start to cook it. All right. So I believe we got a good little char going here. So what we're going to do now, all right, we're going to turn our temperature down to somewhere around 2 and 3. All right, so we're going to go with the lower temperature, and we're going to let this thing simmer. All right, and I have my meat thermometer here. I highly recommend getting a meat thermometer. All right, if you're like me, I don't like to spend money, so I buy a cheap one like this. But they do have electronic meat thermometers that you can stick in there, And we want to find the fattest part of the meat. And we're going to let that go in there, and that way you can check the temperature. Right now, it's nowhere near where we need it, so we're going to let it sit in there. We're going to let it go low and slow, but they also have meat thermometers now. It shows you how much I'm disconnected from technology and technologically illiterate. But they have these things that go into the meat, and you don't even have to sit there and watch it. And it'll send a message to your phone that says, hey, your food's done. I don't know how that works. Maybe that's just me. But I hear they got those things out there, and that sounds great. You can sit inside and you can watch TV or football or whatever, and then it'll tell you when your food's done. Any questions so far on that stuff? No questions? If you all have a question that you don't want to type into the chat, feel free to turn your mic on and say it. All right. So while this is simmering, we're going to go ahead and we're going to move on. And we're going to talk about our ceviche. All right, so we're going to let this simmer for a little while until we get it up to temperature. Yeah, so the ceviche, what we're going to do is traditionally it is a raw seafood dish with vegetables thrown in it. And it has a lot of acidic ingredients, so like lemon, lime juice, onions, tomatoes. And what the concept of ceviche is you put your raw seafood in there and you let it sit in that mixture. The acidity is going to essentially cook the meat. All right. However, we're going to practice safe cooking, and we are going to actually cook our fish before we put it in there, just to be safe because of things that could be in freshwater fish like parasites. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to make sure that we cook that. I recommend that you cook it rather than just letting the acidity cook that meat. So we'll move on over here. All right, let me grab our ingredients. All right, so I went ahead, and as you've seen in the pre-class video, I have those ingredients. I already have them diced up. I have about a half of what the recipe called for, just because we had a class yesterday and a class today, and it makes a lot. It serves about 4 to 6 people as an appetizer. If you're really hungry like me. All right, so another thing I'll mention that was talked about yesterday, somebody seen the bags and they asked, did I write this? I did not. My handwriting is worse than a doctor. So I had to have my wonderful girlfriend label these, because if not, I would forget what they were. She also took the time to color code them. But anyways, so in here we have our tomato diced up. We're going to go ahead and we're going to add our green onion. And you can see the recipe online, how much it calls for of each. All right, so we added our green pepper, sorry, excuse me. So we got our green pepper. We're going to add our poblano pepper. Next thing we're going to add is our red onion. And I promise you, if you were here, as soon as you walked into the building, you smelled the red onion. And everybody else for the rest of the week coming through the kitchen here at headquarters is going to smell the red onion. Now, this right here is personal preference. I like to add in jalapeno, make it a little spicy. Some people may not like the spice, and that's fine. The great thing about this ceviche recipe is it's very user-friendly. You can add different vegetables that you like. So I like to add in jalapeno and mango. All right, a little sweet, a little heat. So we got our jalapeno. And then lastly here, already cut up, we have our mango. Now real quick, I'm gonna hop back over here to our venison and give it a little turn here. Give it a good sear on the outside. Right. So the inside's still pretty juicy there. You can see the outside's got that little sear on it. All right. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to hop back with our fish. All right. So here we have some Lake Cumberland crappie. All right. So we'll get a couple pieces of crappie here. And what we're going to do with our crappie is we are going to take this and we're going to cut it into chunks about the size of a die. All right. Does anybody have any questions so far about getting started with our ceviche?
Could you use like swordfish or some other type of fish species instead of the crappie?
Yeah, so I recommend using some type of fish that has a wider flesh like this. Other fish that we have here in Kentucky that would be good for this would be things like walleye, bluegill, other panfish. I would try to steer away, since we're not frying or adding a lot of seasoning to this, I would steer away from using things like catfish or bass. So I would focus on fish that have a wider flesh.
Okay.
Good question. Hop back here and check the temperature on our venison as it's seared. So we want to try to get this up to about 140. All right. One thing to remember though is we want to take it off a little bit early. It's still going to continue to rise. The temperature on the inside is still going to rise some.
So 140.
Around 140, yes. That's a good medium for venison. Is around 140. Some people may prefer theirs a little rarer. Some people may prefer a little more done. But one thing you want to remember is you want to allow this meat a few minutes to cool off. And also, once again, talking about we want our meat to be tender and juicy. So now that we've seared the juices on the inside, by letting it sit, it's going to allow those juices time to redistribute throughout the piece of meat. So this one, we're going to allow it to sit for a few minutes. But one thing that will happen is the temperature on the inside is going to continue to rise. All right, so on larger pieces of meat, if you have a big roast off the hind quarter, you might want to let that set for up to 10 minutes. So we're going to give this one a little bit of time, about 5 minutes, just to sit here, redistribute those juices, and cool off a little bit. All right. And what I'm doing over here is I'm going to go ahead. We're going to get our fish going. All right, so this one we're going to start with a little bit lower heat, somewhere around 2 or 3. We're just going to get a little oil in the bottom of the pan. All right. We're going to finish cutting up our fish. Sorry that we're cutting back and forth. We're just wanting to make sure that we can fit everything in time. No questions?
Somebody said safety first, turn your panhandles in.
Panhandles in.
Safety first.
Yeah. All right, so we have that. We'll go ahead and we will bring our fish over. All right, we're gonna go ahead and add our fish. All right. So now we got our fish in. We're gonna season with salt and pepper. Just enough to coat our meat. Now, with this, we're wanting to just get it cooked enough to where it's done. We're not wanting to go over with it. We're looking for this translucent color to start to turn white. And once it's white all around, then that fish is going to be right where we want it. We want to keep that flavor in there. We don't want to char it or overcook our fish. I'm going to keep that around 2 and 3. All right, so we're going to bring our meat back here, give it a little time to cool off. And that's what we're working with. A little pink on the inside, a little char on the outside. We've got a good medium here. Knife goes right through it. Anybody hungry now?
Yeah.
Nice medium. You want to try, Becky? Yeah. All right. Becky's going to start us off.
Oh my gosh. It's awesome.
Rachel?
It's better than yesterday. It is.
All right, good, yeah. So good little medium there. And like I said, if you want that to be a little more cooked, I know some people like it to be a little more cooked, that's great. 140 is a good medium, and you can get it up to around 150, 160. But just remember that it's going to continue, that temperature is going to rise a little bit more after you take it off and you allow it to sit. So we're going to mix our fish around a little bit, trying to get that white color, that translucent, turns white.
I got a question.
You have a question? Yes.
Donna wants to know, what if it's on the grill? How would you sear it there? What's the difference?
Great question. So one thing that I like to do at home, all right, you can see it's starting to get a little, here's a perfect piece right here. You can see that outside is that white. We want all of this to turn to that white. All right. So you said Donna had a question?
Yep.
All right.
Not
So
the grill.
good question, Donna. I really like to cook on the grill. And one thing that you can do on the grill, you can sear it in your pan and take it to the grill, or you can put your if you're using charcoal, I prefer to use charcoal. You can have that charcoal on one part of the grill, and you can sear it over that charcoal and then move it to the other side of the grill for indirect heat. If you're using propane, I know some propane grills will allow you to turn on certain burners. You can do that same thing. You can sear it on one side, and then you can pull it to the other side of the grill and let it set over indirect heat and just cook low and slow. So, great question. Is there any other questions at the moment?
I have a question.
Yes.
My husband, when he cooks any type of venison, he soaks it in water overnight. He says that it takes away some of the gaminess. Have you ever done that, or have you heard anything about that?
Yep, I'm glad you asked that, because somebody mentioned that yesterday and we weren't able to record yesterday's program. So I'm glad you brought that up. I've heard of people soaking in water and soaking it in milk to take the gamey taste out of it. Now, personally, I believe that venison has a very dynamic taste when you compare it to things like beef. All right, so it does have a little bit different kick to it. So some people prefer to soak it in things like milk or water to allow it to take that taste out. However, I think that that's part of the experience and part of eating the wild game. It's something that over time you'll get used to it. And for someone like myself, where in my home we primarily eat venison, it's almost the opposite way. If I go out to a restaurant and I'll order a burger or something from a restaurant, I'm like, it's got a little different taste to it. So I think over time you can get used to that and you'll grow to appreciate it. But if in your home, if you're primarily serving things like beef and you're throwing some venison in there with it, you might want to soak it in something like that to kind of take that taste out of it. So it's more of a preference thing. Great question.
Thank you. Thanks.
Donna wants to know, could the hang time affect the gamey taste?
So the hang time is going to allow you to have a better quality piece of meat. It's going to allow it to be more tender. It's kind of gave it time to relax. So that could play a difference in the taste from where it's going to be a little more tender. In the way I see it, the longer time you have to hang it, the better it is. If it's 40 degrees outside and you harvest your deer that evening, you can hang it up and you can keep it outside in the barn somewhere. I prefer to take the skin off of it just because it's a little more difficult to skin a cold deer. So if you can skin it and you can hang it in a protected place where there's not going to be animals getting into it, I highly recommend that. If you have friends or you know somebody that has cattle, try to be a better friend with them and get close and let them allow you to use their meat freezer. So fortunately, I have a friend that has a meat freezer. So if I harvest a deer, I can take it there, I can hang it up, and I can let it hang for 3 or 4 days and come back, and that meat is as tender as it can be. So I highly recommend it. But also there are some cases, where that's not, you can't allow that. So then you have to, bite the bullet. You might have to process that deer that night. For example, Kentucky, we have one of the earliest archery seasons for deer. So it gets very hot in September, and if you harvest a deer, you need to get to that and you need to take care of it as soon as possible. So it really depends on the situation, but if you have the right conditions to hang that deer, I highly recommend it.
Okay, good question.
Yep.
Kendra wants to know, she has heard that the gamey taste was more due to their diet. What do you say about that?
The gamey taste to the diet, I can agree with that. Yeah. That's something, and the reason I sound hesitant on it, it's something that I haven't looked into or researched, but I have heard of cases where somebody harvests a bear, and if that bear has primarily been eating things like fruits and berries, so if they harvest that bear in the spring, which Kentucky doesn't, our season is not in the spring, so other parts of the world, harvesting a bear in the spring that's been eating fruits and berries, it's going to have a sweeter taste to it. And I also heard of people cooking bear that has been eating primarily fish, and they go out to their grill and it smells like they've been cooking fish. So I can agree that their diet probably has some type of influence on the meat. So our fish here, if you want to show one more time, Rachel, we just let it go low. You can see that our fish has started to turn this white color. That's perfect. That's right how we want it. Not overcooked, but just cooked enough that it is safe. All right. So we're going to allow that to sit. Once again, we're going to let that sit so it's not hot going into our mix with our vegetables over here. We'll move our deer out of the way. All right. So next thing we're going to do is we have lemons and limes here to add to our ceviche. All right, so we're going to do 1 lemon. And if you want to take the time to get the seeds out, that's up to you. If you want to go through and pull seeds out. So we got our 1 lemon. We wedged it here. We're going to squeeze that lemon into our mix for our ceviche. And once again, you can see the acidic ingredients as what traditionally would cook that fish. What's that? Is that Olivia joining? Mm-hmm. Hey, Olivia. We get our lemon. Now we're going to add our lime. The first time that I tried ceviche, I was in Costa Rica on a school trip, and my teacher pulled me aside with a cup of some strange mixture and was like, "Here, try this." And ever since then, I've been all about it. I love some ceviche. It's a great appetizer. It's a great way, it's a great different look at eating fish. Don't get me wrong, I love some fried fish, but it's a different way to look and appreciate the flavor of the fish that we have here. Things like bluegill and walleye and crappie. And if you know how to catch some walleye, you got my email. Send me an email. I want to come catch some walleye with you because for some reason I cannot catch walleye. All right, so we got our lemons and limes squeezed in. We're gonna open up a lemonade stand. Little rinse. All right, we've given our fish a little bit of time to cool off. We're gonna bring our fish over. We're gonna add our fish in. Just being cautious to try to keep the liquid out. All right, one more ingredient. All right, so the next thing we have here, we have some cilantro. All right, now I know some people are not a fan of cilantro, and that's fine. Like I said earlier, this is a recipe that is up to you. You can add the cilantro if you like it. The jalapenos, I've known people to add in things like pineapple, different other fruits, hot sauce. We're gonna cut up our cilantro. Add that in. And now we're just gonna mix everything up together. Does anybody have any questions about this process for the ceviche? No questions? Rachel, Becky, anybody want to go first?
Okay, I'll go first on this one. And these are two.
Now, serving our ceviche, a great way to do it is either on crackers or on tortilla chips. All right. The crackers give a little sweeter taste, and the chips give it a little bit of a saltier taste. Olivia, do I deliver to people's houses? No, but Olivia, if you are heading up to headquarters, I promise you the fish smell and the red onion smell is going to be left here in the kitchen. Rachel's going for seconds before Becky goes. I wish we were all together for a bow weekend so you guys could try this stuff out.
5 stars.
All right, Becky's up.
I prefer the tortilla chips.
All right. So before we get into a couple extra things, does anybody have any questions about our ceviche or our venison?
Cynthia says maybe a soft taco filling.
Ooh, yeah. So one thing that I'll do with my ceviche, if I have an extra piece of fish, like I happen to have one extra piece of fish left, you can take your fillets of fish, and I have a little fryer. I'll batter it up, fry the fish, get me a tortilla shell, and I will use the ceviche as like a pico de gallo or a topping on top of the fried fish, and then you have yourself a crispy fried fish taco. Some sour cream, cheese put on there, maybe some salsa. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yep. So the next thing that I have for you all, since it would take hours upon hours to complete the process, we're going to do a quick little video on smoked roast. So it's a roast from the hindquarter, and this is actually the recipe and how I make my lunch meat. So it's sliced thin, and it looks just like it would if you went to the deli and you picked up some lunch meat. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and disconnect my audio, and Rachel's going to turn hers on and share the screen so you all can watch this quick little video, and then we'll go into talking about that process. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Let's see.
Okay. He should have his audio off now. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Bear with me here. Take me a second to get it up. Okay, I'm gonna mute myself again.
All right. Is my audio back, Lauren? Everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Good? All right. So with that, what we did is we took that roast from the hind quarter and we used our seasoning. So I like something a little sweet, like this applewood seasoning right here. And you want to use a lot of this. You want to make sure that you coat the whole outside of it, because once you slice it, the only part that's going to have that seasoning is the outer edge of it. So is there a question?
Yeah, we got a couple of comments. April says we just bought a smoker and she was going to ask about smoking venison, so thank you. Donna wants to know, are these recipes somewhere where I can find them? And she also wants to know, how long did it stay on smoker? Okay,
so we'll start with the first. It was a comment. Somebody said they got a smoker.
April, yeah.
April, awesome. So yeah, so with the smoker on that, actually all we used was charcoal. So there was no wood chips or anything thrown in there. I like to use lump charcoal, right? And what I like to do is, if you don't have a charcoal chimney and you use charcoal, you need to go get one. They're about 10, 15 bucks. You can throw some newspaper in the bottom of it. You put your coals on top of it, light the newspaper. You come back in a few minutes and it's lit. And that's one way that you don't have to use lighter fluid or any other things like that. So you're just getting that charcoal lit from newspaper. And you dump it into your grate. If you have the side box, like on my grill / smoker, you take those coals and you'll put them in one corner. And then from that, you put the new coals on and you put them next to it, and you make like an S shape or a snake shape. And so throughout the day, those hot coals are going to continue to light the coals that are not lit. So it'll burn all day long. That specific roast was on for about 8 hours. And it sat on there low and slow, keep it around 200. And you have those on top of your smoker, you'll have a little hatch to open. On the side of it, you'll have something that allows airflow. If you allow more airflow into the smoker, it's going to burn those coals quicker. So if you need to raise that temperature, and then if you open the top hatch, it's going to let that heat out so it can cool it down some. So that's just ways that you can try to regulate that temperature. Or if it's getting too hot, you can take some coals out, put more coals in, and keep that temperature regulated.
Did you answer where she can find these recipes?
Where you can find these recipes, I will. The ingredients for the backstrap that we cooked and the ceviche are on the Bo webpage. The smoker recipe, what we'll do is this recording will be available on the Bo webpage, and I might be able to add that actual video to the Bo page so you all can find that. But all that is add your seasoning, set up your charcoal, and let that smoke until you get that internal temperature up to about 140. So I'm bad with times. I invite people over for dinner, and they say, when's it going to be ready? And I say, when the food's ready, because I would rather the food get up to the right temperature than take it off and have it ready at a certain time. So I'm more, when it comes to cooking, I'm more on times. So that specific piece took about 8 hours. Now, if you're using a smaller piece, like what we cooked with our backstrap here today, that might only take about 2, 3, maybe 4 hours. It'll take a lot less time just because it's a smaller piece of meat. But we'll make sure that video is up on the Bo page.
Whitney says she's really excited to try this because she struggled with cooking the roast and hasn't been a fan of it before.
There you go. Yeah. So it's just another outlook on what you can do with the roast. I'll tell you another great thing. If you have an Instapot, and if you don't have an Instapot, I recommend getting one. You can make the best pot roast within an hour. So you take a roast like what we showed in that video with that smoker. You take a roast like that. You can turn your Instapot on saute, and you have it seasoned up with pepper and salt, garlic powder, whatever seasonings you like on your roast. Season it up real nice. Sear the outside like what we did here with our backstrap. And you can add in a can of beef broth. You can add in your potatoes, your onions, peppers, carrots. Let all that stuff sit in there for about 45 minutes to an hour, depending on how big your roast is. Then once it's all done, take a packet of au jus gravy, dump it in there, stir it up. It thickens up that sauce, and you almost have like a beef stew, but you can pull that roast out of there and slice it, and it's great too.
Vanessa wants to know, can you use an electric smoker?
electric smoker. I personally do not have experience cooking with an electric smoker. I've eaten off of it, and I think it makes the cooking process a lot easier. You can pick the temperature, I believe, right? You can set it to a certain temperature. You don't have to, yeah, the electric one. I think so. I don't have a lot of experience with it, but I can see that that would make regulating temperatures a lot easier. I have used a wood pellet grill before, which those are great. The one that I used plugged in, you set it to the temperature you want it to get to, and it throws in the pellets, and it adds a little smoky flavor from cooking that wood. So. That's it for questions. All right, so we have one more thing. And I got to watch what I say, because yesterday I said the word treat a lot, and I know somebody in here has the dogs with them today. So the next thing we're going to talk about is actually something that you can use from your wild game to feed your dogs. All right, so I have with me, I have one left to show you. This here is a piece of trout skin. All right. And I like to try to use as much of the wild game as possible. So there's certain things like the skin that I won't eat. And you can use that stuff to feed your dogs as a dog treat. All right. Now, trout skin has a lot of omega-3, correct? Omega-3 in it, which is good for their fur and their skin. All right. So it's a good treat for your dogs. They're going to love the taste of it. And it's good for them. So all we're doing with our trout skin here is we're taking it to a dehydrator, and we're placing it on there spread out like so. And you can see here's a piece from earlier come off. And we have a crispy trout skin treat for the dogs and cats. And Rachel took one home to her cats last night. She said that she tried to give it to the dog, right? The dog didn't know about it, and the cats ended up ripping through the bag and eating all of it. Yep. So it's a good, healthy treat for your pets, and it's good knowing that you use as much of that wild game as possible. Yes, Becky has a question for us.
For the trout skin treats, would you store them in the fridge until you fed them, and then how long would they keep?
So once they're dehydrated, I wouldn't see any problem with leaving them out. I haven't had to put them in the fridge. They're crispy, they're cooked. It should be fine to leave it out. How long? I'm not sure. We usually feed it to them within the week. So so you can keep those and give them to your dogs. I know, I think we looked it up yesterday, salmon skins for, how many was it? $50 for 10 salmon skins sold as dog treats. So it's a good, healthy snack that you can feed your dogs. You're saving money on it. Makes you feel good. So it's just an all-around great thing to do. You can use those trout skins as a dog treat. So do we have any questions before we finish eating our lunch here? We have plenty of time for questions, so if you all have questions.
Can you use any fish skins or just trout?
So I personally have experience only using trout. I would steer away from using things like bass and bluegill because of all those scales. The great thing about the trout skin is it peels off real easy like a sock. Once you get your pliers in there, you can just peel that thing off right like a sock. So it comes off in one piece. You can cut it up. It's really easy to use. Now I know that catfish also have skins. I have no experience feeding the dogs catfish skin. But one thing that I would really pay attention to if you are going to try this with catfish, make sure that you go ahead and get rid of those pectoral fins and that dorsal fin, because they do have a barb on them that you can be poked by, it can cut you, and it has a little bit of slime in there that has some toxins in it. So I'd make sure that you go ahead and you get rid of those the pectoral fins, and you get rid of the dorsal fin.
Okay. April says, have you ever tried to make jerky from venison? They are experimenting, and they have succeeded and failed.
Yeah, so I've also succeeded and failed. I use the same dehydrator for jerky. There's a few different ways to do it. You can take pieces and you can cut them into strips. Just make sure that you cut across the grain. If you cut with the grain of the meat, so like we had our back strap here, and you can see that we cut it across like so, all right? If you were to cut it this way, it's going to be cutting to where it's going to cause that meat to be a little more chewy. It's not going to be as tender. So make sure that you cut across the grain. You can cut into thin strips, and you want to season it and put it on your dehydrator. Personally, the way that I do it is I take ground venison and I have a jerky gun, all right? And you stuff that ground venison into the jerky gun after it's already been seasoned, and you just squirt it out onto the tray like where those trout skins were, and you let it sit there until it starts to get to where it has a little crunch to break, and then you're good to go. So jerky is a great way. If you got some leftover meat in the freezer and you're wanting to get rid of it, you want to clean out your freezer, you can take it, grind it, and you can make jerky out of it. You can slice it. So it's a great snack to take into the woods. I like to eat deer sausage before I go deer hunting. It just gets me amped and excited to know, hey, this is what I'm going after today. This is why I do it. So yeah, jerky's a great way to do it. You can buy packets that have the seasoning and tell you everything. You can get those at sporting goods stores. Most grocery stores have that. You can season it. It tells you how much. You put it on your dehydrator. Some people like to use an oven. I know there was a Kentucky Afield episode where they make jerky in the oven. If you want to check that out, go on YouTube. You can probably type in Kentucky Afield jerky, and you can find out how they did the jerky in the oven if you do not have a dehydrator. So great question. Do we have any other questions? We have plenty of time if you all have questions. No question. Is anybody at home hungry now? Is Olivia still in here? Yes. Olivia, you have any questions or anything you want to add?
Oh man, I don't know. You made all of us hungry for sure. Thanks for covering the trout skins, and that's awesome, Rachel, that your cat loved them too. Yeah, I know, Alex, you're all about using the most you can out of an animal or fish, so appreciate that. And I on the call here appreciate that as well, and can learn from it and try their own recipes too. No, I don't have any questions. Thank you so much, Alex, for teaching. Rachel, too, for working behind the scenes, and Becky as well. Pro test tasters over there, for sure. But, yeah, just, I guess, quick shout out for the rest of the class. Remember to do your pre-survey if you haven't done so already. Please do that. Whenever you have time, maybe in between lunch here, if you have before next class. And then after the weekend's done, I'll send everybody a wrap-up email, and they'll have the post-survey, so after the program's done, that second survey. And remember, if you complete both of them, you'll be entered in to win another giveaway for a free bow pass for an in-person bow. That's usually $95. Like I said, that doesn't expire. So if we're not able to have the event next year again, it'll still be good for 2022. And, I am also sending invites to our Kentucky Fish and Wild Legacy page. So you'll see an email invite about that too. It's a group that we invite all of our graduates from our Learn to Hunt, Learn to Fish, or our bow programs too. So it's a big community that we all support each other. If you have questions about hunting or what gun to buy or where to go fishing, or if you need a fresh fish, that's where you post on there. So those are a few updates that I had, but I'll let you I'll turn it over to Alex. Thank you.
Thanks, Olivia. So
yep.
We have a question.
Donna says thank you so much for all of this. I really enjoyed all the classes I've taken. I've learned a lot.
Thank you so much, Donna. One thing I was going to say before we hop off here, if there's no more questions, is you all have my email, my phone number. Feel free, if you all have other questions, send me an email, call me. If you just want to chat about hunting or fishing or how to make dog food, give me a call. I'd love to talk to you. So thank you all so much. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a lot. If you have more classes, enjoy those. If this is your last class, then thank you for joining and having a great weekend. So hopefully we'll be doing in-person bow next year, and we might get to try some of these out and everybody get to eat some of it. So deer season is in. If you are an archery hunter, archery season's in. Crossbow comes in Saturday. You got muzzleloader in October. You got modern firearm in November. Back to muzzleloader in December, and then archery all the way up until the middle of January. So you got plenty of time. Go ahead, go out there, enjoy the hunting seasons, enjoy the fall, catch you some fish, make some ceviche, go out, harvest yourself a deer, and have plenty of food to put in your freezer. So thank you all for joining. All right, no more questions? All right, so we're going to go ahead and we'll end this meeting a little early. I know some of you all are probably hungry, so you can go ahead, get you some lunch if you have another class in the afternoon. And once again, thank you all so much for joining. We'll get this video uploaded to your bow page so you can reference back to it and you can see this stuff again. So thank you all.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.